Starting here shortly. Good evening and welcome to the Administration and Finance, Recreation and Parks Committee for May 10th, 2022. We certainly want to acknowledge our mayor and council members, Mayor Kurt Wilson, Council Member Christine Hall, Council Member Peter Vanstrom, Council Member Lee Hills, and Council Member William Morthland. The purpose of committee meetings are for the city departments to convey information to the mayor and city council and address and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda, as well as provide updates of vital information essential to the operation of city government. By ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, members of city council, and the city administrator. The ordinance mandates city administrator as the chair of committee meetings. This is a public meeting, not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is open to the public, we do not take public comments or questions during committee meetings. Public comments or questions are received at the regular city council meetings held at 7:00 p.m. in the city council chambers on the second and fourth Mondays of each month and the fifth Monday of each month in open forum. We do encourage citizens to engage our online platforms. If you have any questions or need information regarding any matter, our staff is available to provide that information to you. I would encourage the viewing audience and those present to visit the city website for meetings, events, and departmental information. The city web service portal is a mechanism to report issues and concerns. In addition, please review the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget on the city website. There you will find details of the components which comprise the budget as proposed for the upcoming fiscal year. The proposed budget was presented at yesterday evening's regularly scheduled city council meeting. You can also contact our finance staff for questions, clarifications, and a comprehensive understanding of the budget framework. The first reading for the budget will take place on May 23rd at 7:00 p.m. here at City Hall in the City Council chambers. The second reading, public hearing, and expected adoption of the FY 2023 budget will be held on June 13th at 7:00 p.m. City Hall, City Council chambers. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Administration and Finance and Recreation and Parks Committee meeting of April 12th, 2022. I will entertain a motion of approval of those minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Motion to approve by Council Member Morthland, second by Council Member Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you very much. The second item we have on the agenda under finance is consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with J.P. Morgan Chase for banking services in an amount not to exceed $60,000. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Clarification on
Yes,
the
ma'am.
minutes. Item number 5, the result was approved to move to mayor and council, but that was coming back here, or did it go to mayor and council and then come back here?
Microphone.
Okay.
Microphone.
I just wanted to clarify item number 5. It did go to mayor and council and then was turned back here, correct?
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
It was a late night last night.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you for that clarification. Item number 2 under finance is the consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with J.P. Morgan Chase for banking services in an amount not to exceed $60,000 with annual renewal options for a maximum of 5 years. Mr. Luckett.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. Hello, everyone. As Councilmember Hall mentioned, we talked about this at committee meeting last month, and it was pulled from the consent agenda at the mayor and council meeting a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to try and address what I think are some of the questions, and I'll be glad to answer any other questions you might have on that. Before I get into that, just as a quick reminder of kind of what's included here. So we issued the RFP back in January. The services that the city purchases basically from a bank. We're looking for depository services, online account management, wire transfers and ACH deposits and payments, check imaging, e-lockbox and lockbox services, electronic accounts payable, and P-card services. The city received 3 proposals from JPMorgan Chase, Truist, and Wells Fargo. Those proposals were evaluated by a committee of city staff, and JPMorgan Chase had the highest scoring proposal of those 3 proposals. We are recommending award of a contract to them, a not to exceed amount of $60,000 for a maximum of 5 years. And I'll stop here for just a moment and say I think maybe this is where I wasn't quite as clear, and I apologize if I wasn't very clear here. The contract amount that we're seeking, $60,000, is really a contract authority amount. We don't expect to spend that much, and we can actually lower this if that gives you a little more comfort level. But it's based off of what we spent in the last complete fiscal year, which was FY21. We spent a little over $50,000. And the main reason for that was because interest rates were so low at the time. I mentioned that a couple times before, about 18 basis points. Based on the earnings credit, and just to kind of give you some background here, so the earnings credit rate is what is paid to the city based on our account balances. And so for basically the bulk of the time when we were during the pandemic and COVID, the city was, rates came down, we were earning about 18 basis points on our bank balances. That was not enough to cover all the bank fees that we have, and the bank fees go to support the various services that we're buying. That primarily includes things like our lock boxes, which we use to make our payment processing more efficient because we're not having city staff or city equipment. We're using a third party to process those payments and get them in the bank as quickly as possible. So what I will say is that moving forward, as you all know, the Fed increased rates last week. And so moving forward, we would expect to earn about 75 basis points on our bank balances that would go towards our fees. And any excess of that, we would actually earn interest on. So just to point out, so with the increase in our interest rates, the city should expect to pay $0 in banking fees for the foreseeable future. And any balances that we have in excess of that, we'll actually earn interest on. And just to kind of give you an example of the previous month, we would have paid our previous month's fees, we would have paid $0 in fees, and we would have earned about $11,000 in interest just for the month of March. So that's kind of where we stand today, and that's what we're recommending to move forward with. And again, I apologize if I wasn't very clear in the past, but under this, with the rising rate environment, we do expect to pay $0 in banking fees. And with the P-card services that we use as well, we expect to earn a rebate of a little over $50,000 in a year. So I'll be glad to answer any questions anyone has.
Yes, Councilmember Hall.
So if I understand correctly, in these large commercial transactions like with the city, the bank would charge us for services, for each of those services. And because they also like to have our deposits there, they trade off, give us some credits for keeping those deposits in, and there's a bit of a formula where sometimes in lower interest years, we may have actually had to pay some fees, but when the interest rate starts going up, it works in our favor.
Correct.
Okay.
You're right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from Mayor and Council? All right. Seeing none, then we'll entertain a motion removing this forward to the next council meeting.
To move it forward.
All right, motion by Councilmember Hall.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Morthland. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? All right, thank you very much. The next item, item number 3, presentation of the FY 2022 third quarter budget report. Mr. Luckett.
Thank you. Yes, this is our third quarter budget report. Just wanted to review some of the high level information with you. Our report starts with just a kind of a narrative over the general fund and our other funds and where they stand through the third quarter. But we'll get into the general fund first. And I'll start on page 6 of the report. kind of gives you a little more detail about the general fund. So that top table shows you our general fund revenues through the month of March. And so our 22 budget, revised budget for the general fund revenues is 81.6 million. We projected to receive a little over 70 million. We've actually brought in about 76.4 million. So we have a positive variance in our revenues of about 6.4 million. You can see the bulk of that is within our local option sales tax, that second line. Through the month of March, we have collected about 3.1 million more than what we had projected to that point in the fiscal year. That's about 22% over where we were in the prior year, and about 14% higher than what we've budgeted. Just to give you a little bit more information about everything else, so property taxes were $1.1 million ahead of our projections. The bulk of that is from the title ad valorem tax, which is the tax paid on vehicles that are registered in Roswell. Our business taxes, we have a positive variance of about $850,000. Most of that is in occupation tax. Our licenses and permits, we have a positive variance of $544,000, and most of that, about $400,000, is related to the various fees that are collected in community development for building permits, grading permits, those kinds of things. The next table gives you a breakdown of expenditures. So here, this is expenditures by type. So you can see our FY22 revised budget is $90.3 million. That's broken out across salaries and benefits, operating, and transfers and other. We've projected to spend $64.1 million. We've actually spent about $60.3. So we have a positive expenditure variance of $3.8 million. $1 million of that roughly is in salaries and benefits, and most of that is spread across the fire department, administration, and community development. We have about $830,000 in positive variance in our operating category. That includes some of our line items like contract services, professional services. And then in transfers and other, we have about 1.9 million positive variance. And these are mostly transfers that will occur by the end of the fiscal year. They just haven't occurred yet. About $1 million of that is funds that will be transferred to the fleet fund to support the fleet operations. 360,000 of that 1.9 million is related to the resurfacing loan that actually hasn't entered into repayment yet, so we haven't incurred debt service at this point. 330,000 again is other debt service that just is off in terms of timing with our projections. So that's the $3.8 million total positive variance across the general fund expenditures. And then that last table at the bottom shows you where that stacks up across our various departments. The next page gets into our water and sewer fund. Here we have a revenue budget of $4.8 million, projected at this point in the fiscal year at $3.6 million, and we've brought in about $3.5 million. Expenditure-wise, we had projected $3.8 million up to this point, but we've actually spent about $3 million. Most of that is related to capital projects that haven't actually been spent up to this point. In our solid waste fund, our projected revenue is $10.1 million. Actual revenue at this point in the fiscal year is $10.3 million. Projected expenditures are $10.5 million, and year-to-date actual expenditures are $9.4 million. And the big difference there is, again, timing related to the construction of the transfer station. And I think that's expected to be done sometime this summer. Stormwater fund, our revenues are right on target at $2.5 million. Expenditures, we're coming in at $2.3 million, and we had projected about $2.9 million up to this point in the fiscal year. Recreation and participation funds, revenues are coming in at $6.5 million, quite a bit above projections, and expenditures are at $4.4 million, slightly above projections. And you all recently approved a budget amendment for that fund at the most recent council meeting. Our hotel motel fund, hotel motel tax revenues are performing quite a bit better than we'd expected. So we're at almost $1 million at this point in the fiscal year. We are where we had projected to be at $567,000. Expenditures are ahead of projections because a lot of our expenditures are based on percent of our revenues. So you'll see us bring to you at our year-end budget amendment an adjustment here just to recognize the additional revenue and account for the additional expenditures associated with that. And the last page like this is our E911 fund. Our revenues are slightly ahead of projections at 1.7 million, and our expenditures are just below projections at 2 million through the month of March. And then finally, we have a complete listing of all of our city funds, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have about the budget report.
Any questions or comments about the budget report? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward with this item. This was just a presentation information item. Is that correct, Mr. Luckett?
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to item number 4, presentation of the fiscal year 2022 third quarter investment report. Mr. Luckett.
Thank you. So this is our third quarter investment report. And as you might remember, the city does have an investment program. We have an investment policy that's been approved by the mayor and council, and we are regulated by that and by state law in terms of what types of investments that we can purchase. And the purpose of the program is to really maximize city funds that are being held before they're actually spent, mostly capital type funds. So just to start out and to reemphasize, the city's investment objectives in order of priority are safety of the principle that we're using, compliance with federal and state law, liquidity to ensure that we have enough cash to meet our obligations, and then finally income to maximize the amount of interest that we're earning within these constraints. At the bottom, this gives you a status update of the overall portfolio, and you can see that our portfolio is at 63 basis points overall. Compared to the one-year treasury, obviously with the recent increase in interest rates, they're able to, that changes a lot more quickly, and it takes us a little bit of time to kind of catch up to that. So our interest rates, our portfolio yield has increased, but we're still behind the U.S. Treasury, the one-year treasury. This gives you a 12-month indication of kind of where those rates have gone. You can see we've held steady around 60 basis points now for the past year. And really as of the last couple of months, you can see the rapid increase in treasury rates. So the city's earning about 65 basis points less than the one-year treasury benchmark. At the bottom, the pie chart shows you kind of where our investments are spread around. We have about 25% in bank deposits, about a third in Georgia Fund 1, which is our local government investment pool that's managed by the state of Georgia that we can participate in. And then the remainder includes federal agency bonds, U.S. Treasury bonds, and CDs. The next table just provides you a little more detail, so you can see that overall we have about $168 million. Of that, again, you can see about 23% is in our bank deposits, 31% in Georgia Fund 1, and the rest spread among the various vehicles that we are able to utilize. And the chart below then shows you the split and how that's changed over the past 12 months. The next table is meant to kind of illustrate our overall liquidity for the portfolio. So you can see that the average length of maturity for the portfolio as a whole is 1.71 years. And then at the bottom, you can kind of see a maturity schedule for those investments. You can see the bulk of what we have in terms of available cash is immediately available because it's being held in bank deposits, Georgia Fund 1, and our money market account. And then the rest are spread out from 1 to 5 years. And then the remaining pages just kind of give you the detail of all the various investments that the city is currently holding. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Luckett. Do we have any questions or comments from Mayor and Council regarding the third quarter investment report? Okay. All right. Seeing no questions or comments from mayor and council. We thank you for that, Mr. Luckett, and thank you for that great information. Item number 5 is a discussion of options for potential retirement of outstanding debt. Mr. Luckett.
Thank you. So just to provide a little bit of background on this item, during the FY23 budget development process, staff and working with the mayor looked at different options to identify some additional general fund resources that could be used for high priority operating enhancements for the proposed budget. One idea that we discussed was to use some of our general fund balance in excess of our emergency reserves to pay off some outstanding debt. And I wanted to provide an overall picture of our outstanding debt that is funded by the general fund. So this includes the Chafin Road property, Mimosa Hall, the 7 Branches property, road resurfacing catch-up that we used state money for. And then there are various capital leases for fire equipment and some IT equipment as well. So overall, there's outstanding debt in the general fund, paid for by the general fund of about $15.9 million, and annual debt service that is funded by the general fund of about $2.8 million. And you can see the terms here range from 10 to 15 years. With our capital leases, some of those are as low as 4 years, as high as 15 years. With rates across the board, the 7 Branches property, you're paying 0.5%, up to a little over 3% for some of our capital leases. So the proposal that's included in the 23 proposed budget includes 2 loans that were identified for potential repayment. This includes the Chafin Road property and Mimosa Hall. The 23 proposed general fund budget actually assumes that these 2 loans will be paid off. And by doing that, we're able to redirect $713,000 in annual debt service to some of those higher priority operating enhancements. In addition to redirecting some of those annually recurring resources, by paying off this debt, the city could also save about $140,000 in interest over the remaining 4 to 5 years of these 2 loans. I will point out the Chafin Road property, the loan associated with that does have a 1% prepayment penalty on their outstanding balance, and that would equate to roughly $15,000. And that $140,000 is net of that amount. So these 2 loans have an outstanding principal amount of about $3.2 million. And what we would propose is that we could use some of our sales tax revenue that has come in quite a bit higher this year than what we'd anticipated. So we've given you an idea here. Our budget for local option sales tax is $26.65 million. We're estimating that we'll bring in right at $30 million. That gives us about $3.35 million over budget that we could devote towards this, about 12% over the revised budget. That would leave us about $2 million. We've gone back and we've done an overall estimate for the general fund. And so if this is used for debt, that would leave us roughly a little over $2 million in revenues over budget that we would have for next year. Plus, when you factor in some expenditure savings of maybe roughly $1 million on top of that. So maybe about $3 million would be remaining to be programmed by the mayor and council for various ideas or projects. So next steps, if this is approved to move forward, we would need a budget amendment to appropriate the funding in FY22 in the amount of $3.2 million. Then we can move forward with coordinating with the various banks to get these 2 loans paid off. If mayor and council choose not to move forward with this, we would need to go back and amend the FY23 proposed budget because we would have to add back the debt service for these 2 loans of $713,000. So that's the presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Luckett. All right, Councilmember Morthland.
On the prepayment penalty on the Chafin Road, when does that go away? If we didn't do this, would that, a couple of years down the road, free itself up, or are we always going to have that prepayment penalty for the foreseeable future?
No, if it continues on until it matures and we pay it off at the end, there's no prepayment penalty. And so that is scheduled to be paid off in 2026. So about 4 more years to go.
What's the net gain with us paying the prepayment penalty and getting away from the debt service?
Well, with the interest savings across the board, we anticipated to save about $140,000 over the remaining 4 to 5 years of both of these loans. And then just the added benefit of being able to use some of those recurring resources for some of these other priorities.
We'll come out ahead pretty quickly, yeah.
Yes, Councilmember Hills.
Just for my knowledge, what is the Chafin Road property? What is that?
So that was a piece of parkland that the city purchased back in 2016. I believe it's 25 acres.
You know it. You know it well.
It's Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. So, interestingly enough, this discussion goes against a lot of the discussion that the mayor and council had the last few years, was that the city's, really underutilized debt. And so I guess I have some hesitation knowing that interest rates are rising, inflation is certainly rising. So I guess I'm hesitant to want to really pay off this debt, just especially knowing there's a prepayment penalty, and knowing that certainly I'm thinking we're not going to get this attractive interest rates in the future. So I guess help me understand how it's working that by paying more this year, we're actually freeing up more in the budget. So I guess help me understand. I know you absolutely beautifully walked us through it, but I certainly want just to I need some repetition to fully understand it.
Sure. So both of these loans have annual debt service of about $713,000. So that's recurring money that we're using, recurring resources to fund. So if we use, we're using basically one-time money this year. If we were to use some of the sales tax that came in above budget to pay off this, it's a one-time payment, basically. And so by doing that, we no longer need the funds for debt service. And so you all are able to allocate those funds for other operating needs that have a recurring impact. So we're trying to make sure that we're matching up recurring resources with recurring expenditures. And so by paying off the debt, it just provides more flexibility to fund some of the operating enhancements that you want.
So I think you clarified it too for me. Just basically looking at it as we've got our one-time money, kind of similar how do we use for capital, and then we have the ongoing. So it's basically knowing if we want to fund something that is going to be ongoing, then we're down $700,000, whatever the exact amount is, and it's because we've got $3 million that you wouldn't want to use. Is it just that we wouldn't want to use the $3 million towards ongoing items, or it's just more of just obviously that $3 million runs out if we do assign it to ongoing? I guess help me understand how that works.
Yeah, the $3 million, I would say it. I don't mean to make it complicated, but in FY22, technically that's money that's going to be one time. We've factored in all recurring resources in the FY23 proposed budget, and all that's been programmed out for various expenditures. But because our budget was lower in FY22 than what we've actually collected in sales tax, we have this surplus. So basically we're saying that as a one-time use, we would propose using it for the debt service. Sorry, to pay off the debt.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, quick question, because I did know that we had a 1% prepayment on the Chafin Road property. When we put all this together, that piece is new to me.
Yes,
I'm guessing it's new to you.
It is. That was one of the things as we moved forward and did our due diligence on looking at paying this off and all that kind of stuff, we discovered that there was the prepayment penalty associated with that.
One-time fee of $15,000, which
Right.
does not bring delight to any of us. I think to answer Councilmember Palermo's question, so when you look at, because obviously the cost of money on these two pieces is cheap, right? Very cheap. We know cost of money's going up, obviously. We obviously think we might be procuring some more debt. One of the things we kind of approached on this, Michael, was going out and saying, all right, how can we fund the budget now, right? And so this freed up $700,000 of cash flow. And to the answer on that 3.2 million, it's really a one-time opportunity because it's excess of the fund. In other words, we have legal limitations of where we can spend the money. So if we kept it in debt, right, yes, the cost of money is cheaper on servicing that debt. Absolutely right, which is a valid point. The problem is that you're not getting, yes, your cost of money is cheap, but you're not getting a greater utilization in terms of your current funding and your budget, where you could free up $700,000 of cash. And that's really why we did this, because of the one-time opportunity where we had very limited places to put the money based upon the law. And so this seemed like a really great answer of paying off debt and freeing up cash flow for the city. I thought it was kind of clever, actually, because it was $700,000 that I think historically the city probably would not have looked at this option. And I think it was a better use. I think anytime you can pay off debt, right, as a business or as an individual, that's something that you always would like to do. The amount of cash flow that it freed up is significant. So, yes, it is to say, yes, the cost of money is particularly cheap on one of these pieces of leverage, but the cash flow surplus, based upon the limitations of what we could do with the excess reserves, to me, made it a very good play.
And one thing to add to that too, I'm not sure if one of the differences too with these two loans in particular is that these are kind of one-time projects, whereas some of our capital leases, we're talking about IT equipment and fire trucks, things we're always going to have. So we're always going to have that need for those types of items. These are two items that could have been funded through a bond or some other mechanism, but instead, because of the needs of the time, we're funded through the general fund, and they're using general fund recurring operating resources to pay off the debt service. So that's one difference, I think, to consider.
All right, yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Excellent. So I have a couple of comments and then some additional questions. So first of all, I think there's no question this is very clever. It definitely has merit, and it's clear why this is being proposed, because obviously, we have some very important goals that do have annual recurring costs, and this can assist with that. So I totally get that. I'd say, I certainly have some discomfort when it comes to knowing that the city certainly could take on some additional debt, and the high likelihood that additional debt would be at a higher rate than this. That gives me some unease, and that's one thing. I certainly, just a prepayment penalty in general, and knowing that it's a lower interest rate than we're going to be able to get when we do look to potentially take on more debt, that gives me some discomfort. And then so going back to just the aspect that there's limited aspects that this can be used for. Here's a question. I have no idea what the answer is, and actually I don't know if this is for you or if this is for transportation. And so knowing that we have T+2, and we have a lot of just important projects that the voters have us committed to. And last night we discussed the importance of really accelerating those projects as much as possible. I guess my question is, if any of this money that's being discussed to go towards this was instead, if it was able to be loaned towards those projects, towards T+2, A, is that something that would accelerate in any way any of the projects? And B, if so, are we allowed to loan towards T+2, or basically kind of accelerate the funding in any way? And again, I have no idea if that's legal, if that works operationally, but just wanted to throw it out there as a question.
I think we would have to check on that a little further. I know specifically that we could not issue debt to advance T-Splosh, and I know you're not saying that, but that would have had to have been on the list of projects to get that permission to be able to do that. But I'd have to think through that a little more to see if that would, if using general fund dollars to speed things up would be an option. And I can talk to legal about that maybe.
And then so that was the financial part of the question. I guess the operational part of the question is, even if you did have an extra, $1.5 million, $3 million, whatever it was, could that start any project sooner, or would we still be looking at the same timeline?
I think given those kinds of dollars in the single million kind of range, I'm not sure that it would significantly impact our timeline, especially since we're expecting a pretty decent revenue rate coming in, and we have a lot of work to do just to get those projects into you for construction.
Thank you.
All right, thank
Just
you.
to point out too, the Transportation Department through T-Splosh 2, they'll have, currently, they have access to 3 months worth of T-Splosh 2, even though we haven't gotten there yet. When we anticipate collecting roughly 1.6, 1.7 a month. And then next year will be an additional $17, $18 million, so.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, you are seeking an approval to move this item forward. And the budget amendment obviously would be needed in conjunction with the overall ultimate approval of the budget. Is that correct?
Right.
All right. So with that, and if there are no further comments, I'll entertain a motion to move this item forward. Yes?
I'll make a motion to move this item forward. Mr.
Motion by Mayor Wilson. Second by Councilmember Hall. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? All right, we have 4 in favor. All those opposed? We have 2 opposed.
I
Okay.
would love to have had some more conversation if you guys were opposed to it.
Well, I'd actually, I'd say I have a lot of research and considerations to do prior to this coming to council, because basically,
This was part of a budget presentation. This was in our budget presentation.
What I would like to do is still understand, and I know from running my own business, at the end of the year, there's a lot of rules and limits of what's left in the pot. I'd like to really understand a lot better of what could be done with what's left,
Okay.
as opposed to this option.
and in addition to that, from my perspective, the prepayment penalty was new information that just does give me some additional discomfort that I want to think about a little more, but certainly we'll do a lot of consideration prior to this coming to council.
All right, with that, the item did pass to move forward, and understanding that perhaps some additional conversation and clarification will need to be provided prior to our next budget hearing, which is part of our process. And so we'll continue to move these items forward and have the necessary conversations and clarifications and additional information that's needed. All right, thank you. The next item is under Recreation and Parks. Thank you, Mr. Luckett. Under Recreation and Parks, item number 6, consideration to approve proposed additional language to the Historic Assets Rental Program policy.
Good evening. I'm going to invite our Historic Assets Manager,
Okay.
Dina Bush, to present tonight this
All right, thank you.
item.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. First of all, I would like to start by providing a brief update as to where we are at with the rental program. That is to provide more information that is going into this request. So, in the past 2 years, particularly leading up to Mimosa Hall, staff overall saw an opportunity to leverage the Historic House Museums with Roswell River Landing and Old Mill Machine Shop in order to market and package this collection of sites as specialty venues for our department overall. We had several goals and markers of success for that work and for that action. One of the first major action points was restructuring the administrative specialist position that oversaw Roswell River Landing and Old Mill Machine Shop at the time, but to bring her underneath the Historic Assets Division. And that would enable us to have one centralized staff member as a single point of contact for 6 rental facilities. So that would mean a single point of contact for the historic sites, as well as Roswell River Landing and Old Mill Machine Shop. And we also reclassified that position to a program specialist position to help accommodate that. We also felt operationally this was a good decision because it would provide better customer service, and the program specialist would be able to quickly show different options to potential rental guests and clients, and in some cases, which we happened this past year, easily transfer events from one location to the other due to last-minute logistical needs on behalf of the rental client. Also part of this restructure process, the centralized staff just better enabled us to balance our calendar needs with rentals and program use. And Roswell River Landing historically brings in a little over $100,000+ of rental revenue. But with that connection and that business would help us network and expand that with bringing Mimosa Hall online on board, as well as the refreshing and starting the policy of the historic assets rental program. So with that, one of the very first major steps that we did, along with the restructure, is we brought a new historic assets rental policy to Mayor and Council, which was approved in September 27th, 2021, so last fall. And we have been busy since then. We have been working on updating the contracts and client communications, meaning what is our agreement with how site logistics and guidelines are operating. We've also been working with community relations, working on marketing. We've also been working on creating a stronger website presence, and we are creating with community relations a designated rentals web page. We have a strong draft in hand in place for that, and that should be going live this month. So we're looking forward to bringing that forward. It is our aim overall to create collateral that is as evergreen as possible in order to highlight that website. We've also been creating content and building our photography assets and needs for future marketing. We've also been, a big step has been building an attendant program in order to facilitate the volume that we're anticipating coming up, because we now have 6 location of venues with that. That happened this past fall. Future success will be similar to Roswell River Landing, where we have multiple events going over a weekend. But now we're anticipating moving forward, we're going to have not only multiple events going in the venues like Roswell River Landing, but also multiple events happening at multiple venues all at the same time. So that is an exciting and place to be, and something that I'm looking forward to. But we will need to work in that staffing, that supervision infrastructure for that support leading up to that. We also, in the past few months, particularly with Mimosa, have been doing a couple of test opportunities. We did a couple of test rentals, or soft openings, if you will, just to better understand rental operations and functionality within that space. We found this to be very helpful in finalizing details and action notes for the future. We also have coming up at Barrington Hall in September of 2022, our largest wedding rental to date, with a guest list of over 300 people. So we're definitely working with the vendors, again, to help kind of test that logistically and what that means for us. We've also been working with tent vendors to more precisely ascertain yard tent options at places like Mimosa outside, at Barrington Hall, as to how can that accommodate exterior events. So quickly, moving forward, what does success look like for us? It definitely is finalizing marketing and pushing that out, pushing content via social media and brochures and other hard collateral. It's also continuing to develop the vendor program development and networking opportunities. You should see coming up soon in the fall, perhaps around September, specific open house opportunities for vendors, but then also open house opportunities to build clients and also awareness, which should take place around key target dates. For example, in February of 2023, after the high proposal season, to be able to lean into that wedding industry and hopefully to build out our rental schedule going into 2024, seeing that people plan these events a year in advance. We also plan to attend networking opportunities, expos, and the like within the Atlanta metro area. We also would like to, in the next 18 to 24 months, continue to evaluate and develop ideas, additional ideas that will work with local vendor relationships and create fun events, perhaps like a pop-up wedding event where we could do multiple weddings at the same time for a set price, birthday and reunion packages, so just ideas of that nature to develop. Overall, we are back to where we were revenue-wise pre-COVID, I'm happy to say. You can see at the chart here, just with historic assets this year, we have already, and the year's not finished, completed, we've already doubled our revenue when it comes to that. So we hope to continue that progression and increase that incrementally as we move forward. We also, one thing that I am really interested in working on is better implementation of data retention points. And that's really important to me from a business perspective. So I want to capture data such as what are the margins for site tours that actually turn over into signed contracts? Why are they signing with us versus perhaps not? How do people learn of us? How do they learn of the venue? Where are they coming from and where are their guests coming from? Where are their vendors coming from, and what does that mean for local business versus bringing outside business into Roswell? And I also plan on working with Visit Roswell just to better understand that impact, potential impact to the local economy. Of course, big picture, this is all tied to our plan to offset overall operational cost of the historic assets for the city, as well as just hopefully better position ourselves as an economic contributor to the community, bringing businesses to local business owners, as well as tourism into Roswell. So what we are bringing to you tonight, one of the things that we learned is a request for consideration and feedback for adding this one statement proposal to the rental policy, which is worded under section U at the very end. In the event of a rental request of multiple days for a single contract, the director has the authority to negotiate contract rental fees in coordination with the city administrator. We have learned of the potential of businesses that may be interesting, particularly for hosting meetings or training events, multiple days. That could be a week long or 2 weeks or so forth. So there's also a need for a quick turnover, very fast response. So we have found that we need to have this need and added to the overall rental policy. And it will also just better address our potential economic impact opportunities for the city benefit and to capture those ideas and those businesses that are brought to the city due to those events, more so than perhaps a just single day contract. So our recommendation is we just like for your consideration and feedback, and I am happy to answer any questions at this time.
Yes, Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Ms. Bush. That was a great presentation, and my favorite part is how much the revenues have increased, and just clarification on that 7,600 plus. Is that up to now, or, I mean, I think it said in 7 months. That's not forecasting through the end of the year yet?
That is correct.
So
Yes,
that'll
ma'am.
go up. And what do you attribute that to? Congratulations. I know it's
Sure.
not a huge amount of money, but it's a huge move.
Well, it's a step in the right direction. I'll say that. I attribute that to bringing the decision to bring Susan McCoy in that position through the historic assets and the opportunity that we saw to brand the historic sites with Roswell River Landing and Old Mill Machine Shop as those specialty venues. We have established business with Roswell River Landing as well as local vendors. So I think that networking, that communication with that position underneath historic assets has certainly, we've seen that benefit with that.
Gotcha. And I appreciate you including in here the fee schedule, which I, having a background in this industry, really appreciate looking at that. How long have you had that in place, and how has that impacted your functionality and your ability to capture business quickly? You know, book a client, so to speak.
Sure. Well, this has been in place since Mayor and Council voted on the policy in September. And in terms of functionality, it's worked well. We do recognize that we're going to continue to evaluate response from potential clients. That's one of the reasons why it's important for me to capture that margin of turnover as to how many site visits we're doing, follow up, and what's that margin of that actually becoming a signed contract, to lean into some of those decision points and how that's impacting us. But at this time, we're still looking into that. I think what we've learned, and why we're bringing this tonight, is that we actually, I think, perhaps miss this component in the fact that there is a business out there, clearly, that they're looking for a multiple day opportunity, which Mimosa leads into really well, because we opened it up as a meeting facility with monitors and equipment. People are definitely attracted to it because it is a unique venue and not just going to a hotel conference room, so to speak, that's a little bit more stagnant, if I can use that word. It's a fun venue, but we realize that we need to have a little bit more flexibility with extremely fast turnover to be able to negotiate based upon what their budget may be.
Yep, and last thing, I absolutely support the ability to be able to make that call. Getting that booked and having some flexibility in the fees on that, I think is completely within reason, and I'm all for it, so thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Morthland?
Have we missed any opportunities by not having this in place?
We did miss one, yes, sir.
Address some of that?
Yes, sir. It was a very last minute. It was a local company that was interested in renting Mimosa facility for a span of 9 days. So basically 2 business weeks. They were looking for a training facility with breakout areas for a small group of their new employees. And we gave them what was our cost estimate. It wasn't quite where their budget was. But they just had such a fast turnover. We were trying to do everything that we could to address it, but it just did not work out at the time.
Councilmember Palermo?
Thank you. So thank you for this presentation. I think the goal is definitely makes sense on just the benefit to the city, all the things that you've mentioned. Also, a lot of the time when you do have these type of these type of rentals, that actually potentially leads to really a lot of catering bills, a lot of restaurants afterwards, and so I think some great benefits to the business community as well. The one word that I'm wondering and questioning, can we go to the actual language, is basically, so I definitely agree that the process needs to be improved as you've presented. You just mentioned in coordination with the city administrator, which coordination, that's not completely clear what that means. And I'm basically wondering to this committee, would it make more sense for the city administrator to approve it? So something where it's still the fast turnaround, it's still the director being the one that's negotiating, and just ultimately as a check and balance, just the negotiated rate, the director would go to the city administrator, which the city administrator would either approve or of course, deny if he felt it wasn't in the best interest of the city. But that's the one word. Other than that, I definitely agree that the director should have the authority to negotiate contract rental fees for the exact goals you've mentioned.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Hall?
Thank you, and good point. I agree with that. The coordination is not clear. Just a couple of questions, and they are related to the other properties, the Riverside and the machine shop. They're not they're not managed by you? Can you clarify that, how the rentals of those?
Operationally, the rentals are underneath my division. Susie McCoy, Program Specialist 1, she reports underneath my team, which folds up to me as manager. So operationally, the rentals are underneath historic assets for Roswell River Landing and Old Mill Machine Shop.
Why aren't they all listed on this one sheet together? All of our, I don't see them on here, or maybe I'm missing them. I just see Barrington, Bullock, Mimosa.
I can tackle that one. It's a function of the authority that's delegated to the Recreation Commission. The historic assets are not delegated to the Recreation Commission, so they fall directly under the purview of the mayor and council. And so mayor and council approve the fee schedule associated with the historic asset. The Recreation Commission approved the fee schedule associated with the landing and the machine shop.
Just seems like there's two lanes and it all can be under one lane, one way or another.
Yeah, what we have done from an adjustment perspective, when mayor and council approved the local vendor element of the historic assets, then we rolled that back over to the Recreation Commission for the same policy consideration, so they match. And so in this case, we would do the same thing. After mayor and council take a look at this one, assuming that you approve it moving forward, we would take the same policy and recommendations to the commission.
And and I think we talked about this maybe last year when we did the policy. Is there a discount for Roswell residents to rent?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further comments or questions? All right, seeing none, we'll entertain a motion. Yes, Councilmember Palermo?
I'll make a motion to bring this forward to council for this update, with the one update being, instead of in coordination with the city administrator, instead with something along the lines of with approval from the city administrator.
All right, thank you. With that motion, do we have a second? Yes, second by Councilmember Hall. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All right, thank you. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item we have is item number 7, consideration to approve the River Parks Master Plan Addendum. Mr. Leatherman?
Thank you, sir. We have talked in a number of committee meetings regarding the master plan addendum. This is the formal documentation that I'm recommending and bringing forward, which would amend the already approved River Parks master plan with the current process moving forward of accommodating mining and or dredging along the Chattahoochee River. It also describes the potential impact associated with that direction and where we may displace certain recreation elements such as the multi-use building to Don White Park and other portions of the trail system. And so we wanted to formally document that. We're bringing it forward in this written format and are requesting your approval of this addendum to the 2016 River Parks Master Plan. Be happy to answer any questions as we go forward as well.
Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I would just like to have it on record that as you look forward with this addendum and other future addendums, that the dredging operation be turned into a little bit of a museum, and perhaps we can repurpose the yellow house to be the actual museum piece for children to learn about dredging and interesting things that they can learn from that process.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
What were your proposed uses of the yellow house?
So the original 2016 plan does not have any proposed uses for that space. As we've talked about, I think on a couple of occasions at least, I think this mayor and council wants to entertain, I think to Councilmember Hall's point, if that house can be leveraged in some way or another for the benefit of the community. And so we can look at that from a feasibility and practicality perspective as we go forward in the various iterations of, you've got ASAN 1 and 2, ASAN 3, plus then modifications that are going to happen based on dredging operations and how that plays out. I think it's clear, just so that I say it on record as well to staff, that whatever decisions moving forward, this mayor and council wants an abundance of clarity on the impacts associated to, in particular, that yellow house and what the potential opportunities are.
So what's existing at Don White Park, there's an older house sitting there.
Yes.
Is that a potential for a cafe utilization of that house and then not utilizing the yellow?
Yes. I think that in my mind, the house at Don White Park, so for just an abundance of clarity, that would be above the, what are now the two volleyball courts. In my mind, that is an ideal location for some sort of multi-use space, cafe and otherwise that we've outlined here in this addendum. It's a little bit higher out of the floodplain, closer to the road along the trail, and that is what we will evaluate, as we displace the multi-use building because of dredging. Where could that potentially go? And so the Don White location is that next logical step based on the existing impacts associated with that building. That also allows for a potential use or a creative use of what is the yellow house there at the ASAN property. Could also be a cafe, could also be museum operation, and leveraging that for public benefit. So I think the cards are out on the table. Obviously, Mayor and Council have not made a final decision either way on where we head, but we're going to try to lay that all out in a more specific way. Right now, with our mayor's proposed budget, we have money set aside for that planning effort, and that will be incorporated into the planning effort into this next fiscal cycle.
Yes, Mel Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I guess we're going to talk about the budget again, which was presented 2 weeks ago in detail, and we went through a lot of these pieces, and part of this was $1 million that we put aside for the planning for additional phases of the river master plan. The second component of this is the dredging is dynamic, and we don't know where the dredging ends up today, gentlemen. So how this turns out in terms of whether the yellow building is a museum or yellow house is a museum or not a museum, that's why we put this into our plan vis-a-vis the budget 2 weeks ago, and so that we would have an understanding that we could have a deliberative amount of time to make the best decision for that house. I didn't know that we were going to get into solutioneering on that particular equation this afternoon.
All right, any further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, this item is, yes, we want to entertain a motion. We're going ahead and moving this item forward for formal consideration and approval. Yes, Councilmember Morthland?
Motion to move this forward.
All right, thank you. Motion by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All right, thank you. All right. Item number 8, discussion of a reimbursement agreement for a boost grant.
And Mr. Malone will be giving that presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Malone?
Good evening, thank you. As we stated, this item is specific to the Georgia Recreation and Parks Association Boost Grant. Our department has been selected for a reimbursement grant in the approximate amount of $23,000 for the Building Opportunities and Out of School Time, which is the Boost program. Our department was one of approximately 26 organizations chosen in the state of Georgia to receive these funds. And the purpose of the Boost Grant is to expand access, reduce barriers for participation, and improve the quality for summer enrichment opportunities for the youth across the state of Georgia. This specific grant would help to subsidize camp costs associated with our Adaptive Friendship Camp. The funds are coming from the American Rescue Plan Act and being administered through the Georgia Recreation and Parks Association. Our Adaptive Friendship Camp is a specialized camp for children with various development or physical disabilities. We partner with Social Skills Today and staff the camp with certified special education teachers and paraprofessionals. These staff members are obviously trained in this field and have experience with children functioning at various levels of development. Currently, this camp is held during the summer for 7 weeks at Walla Park Recreation Center, and this will be our 10th year of operation of this camp. So for tonight, while this is just a discussion item, we wanted to ensure that there weren't any additional questions or objections prior to us submitting the necessary paperwork in the form of an MOU by the GRPA deadline, which is scheduled for May 18th. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So this has been going on, this is our 10th year, doing
This,
this?
this will be our 10th year offering this camp.
And do some of the same kids come back year to year, or siblings, or?
We have several kids that will come back from year to year. The uniqueness of this camp is that we do accept almost all varying levels of abilities and how we're able to offer that camp to members of the community.
And what's the age range?
4 to 18.
4 to 18.
Okay, do you offer anything for the 18 to 22 range that still are I'm gonna use the wrong terminology, but that are still qualify for some of those services, or?
So we
in the
do
schools?
offer programs throughout the year for our, what we'll call our adult population at that point. We do not have a camp specific that would offer a Monday through Friday, 9 to 3 o'clock daytime camp option for the adults.
Have you had questions on that or calls on that, or?
Not to date for the over 18
Okay.
age, but again, we do offer those social events and things like that throughout the year that kind of engage that age group.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I just have a question on the amount. Is this an amount that we've already spent, or is this the maximum amount that we can ask for? Can we get more money?
So this is a reimbursement grant specific to a matrix that was established by GRPA through the American Rescue Act plan. So there's a matrix. It is reimbursable based on the number of kids that we feel like we'll have in this camp. So we are trying to go through that matrix based on historic numbers that we've had in this camp in the past and trying to assume what we'll have in the future. That can vary a little, but that's our approximation based on the figures we've had in the past.
All right, yes, Councilmember Hills.
One more. So these young folks that attend, they do not pay? It's paid for here? Has this been funded in the past?
Sure.
Like
So in the past, we have looked for similar opportunities, whether that be donation, sponsorship, grant opportunities. So the inherent nature of this camp being as specialized as it is approximately $200 to $225 more expensive than our day camp option that we provide. So what we try to do annually is find those opportunities that we can help subsidize that cost. So our goal each year is to try to subsidize the cost of that camp to get it as close to we can as our day camp price point that we can offer to them. So this is what that reimbursement would go toward.
Yes, Councilmember Morthland.
Can I get you to hit on real quick the May 18th deadline and why this is so important that we're speaking about this tonight?
Sure. So I'm sorry, I'll get there. So we received confirmation the end of April that we had been one of the recipients for a reimbursement grant. So as it is now, part of that process requires that the city sign an MOU with GRPA that basically states what the obligation is for that reimbursement option to be available to us. So their deadline of May 18th is what we're trying to hit from that standpoint, from a documentation and paperwork.
A little bit further about council presenting this to council, not presenting this to council going forward where we are now?
So right now we are, I guess, can you ask that question one more time?
Timing of this is really what I'm.
So what we're looking for from council is if there's any objections to us entering into this agreement in advance. Obviously, council can't take action at committee as an approval body, but our deadline is encroaching on us, and so we want to be able to submit the paperwork under the signature authority of the city administrator. If there's any questions or concerns of us moving that forward, then we would re-strategize and bring it to council for approval and then go back to GRPA and seek an extension on that deadline if necessary.
All right, thank you. Any further questions or comments regarding this item? Okay. With that, unless there is any objection, then staff will move forward accordingly in submitting the paperwork for the reimbursement grant. All right? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Under transportation, item number 9, discussion of Pine Grove Road sidewalk gaps. Mr. Skalski and Mr. Cox are handling this one. Oh, Mr. Cox will be handling this one. Okay, Dave. All right, sir.
Well, good evening. We were asked tonight to give you a brief update on the sidewalk gaps along the Pine Grove Road corridor, which includes Magnolia Street. And before we give in, I'd like to ask a quick pop quiz. How many sidewalk gaps are on the corridor? 10, 20, 200? Anyone know? The correct answer is too many. There's always going to be too many sidewalk gaps in Roswell. The good news is we only have 10. This is the list of them. I have a map of them. I'm going to show them all to you on a graphic here in just a moment. They rank between 15 and 110. If you're wondering how many sidewalk gaps we're currently tracking, it's 141 across the city. So they're currently ranked based on a variety of criteria, and I'll go over them very quickly, and if you have more questions, I'll go into more detail. They're ranked on a variety of safety factors, which include the traffic volumes, known areas of speeding. We also look to see if there's a desire path or a goat trail. That's that little dirt area you see on the grassy sections on the sides of roads. That indicates that there's human activity, there's people using it. We also track the hub and spoke system, which was adopted as part of our bicycle and pedestrian master plan, and I have a graphic to show you that in a moment. We also look at if there's a sidewalk on the opposite side of the street. So for example, if you're on one side of the road and there's not a sidewalk and there's a gap there, but there's a sidewalk across the street from you that you might cross to use, we take that into account in our scoring. One of the big parts is proximity to our assets of schools, parks, and commercial businesses, along with MARTA bus stops, our transit component in the city. And we also look at population density, and we also give points on project cost. So to give you a quick overview of the sidewalk gaps on the corridor, this is, do we have a pointer? There we go. Canton Street over here on the east side. You can see the gaps are highlighted with these red dots. You have one right here before Coleman at the signal, just west of Mimosa. And then you get a couple gaps west of North Coleman, down in that swale where that little waterfall is by the lake. When you drive down, you see that little waterfall feature on the right there at the bottom. There's a couple more smaller gaps as you get up the hill closer to Lake Charles. And you can see the linear feet in each one of these, which side of the road and how it ranks in our matrix. Again, the best scoring one is down here, closer to Canton Street at rank number 15, primarily because of its proximity to the various assets of the park here at Heart of Roswell Park and all the businesses along Canton Street. Moving further west, going in the western half of the corridor, getting closer to Cobb County. Here again is Lake Charles on the east side here. You have a long gap on the north side of the road. The good news is there's sidewalk on the south side here. So there's some pretty good sidewalk on the south side. It's just missing on the north. Then it gets a little more fragmented as you head further west. And it really starts to kind of phase out once you get closer to Shallifer Road. And you can see the sidewalks are non-existent as you head out towards Cobb County, which is just off the screen. This is the hub and spoke system. This was a map of multi-use trails that was adopted in the bicycle and pedestrian master plan in 2019. This was basically used to identify a network of trails around the city and where they should be located, mainly connecting the key activity centers, and that's what these gray circles are on the map. Those are kind of the key hubs of activity, obviously Canton Street being one of them. And I have a zoomed in map showing the Pine Grove Road corridor. We have it here on the north side of Magnolia and Pine Grove from basically Canton Street, going out past Mimosa, past Coleman, North Coleman, and we stopped it at Lake Charles. And the reason it stops there is it's approximately 1 mile from Canton Street. We thought about taking it further out, but typically 1 mile was kind of the logical stopping point, just because that was the typical distance people would walk to Canton Street. Maybe they'd walk during ideal conditions when there's really good weather, but I don't know if people are going to walk to Canton Street to go have dinner in the middle of a hot summer afternoon. But this was kind of important because we've gotten several complaints, actually dozens upon dozens over the years, as people cannot walk to Canton Street. And the biggest complaint we've gotten is right in this area, because there's no sidewalks right here on either side of the road. And we have a little gap here I showed you, but this was kind of the key area we focused on. So this was kind of an important part that we wanted to identify for a multi-use trail, because it obviously serves not only pedestrians, but we also have cyclists who like to use Pine Grove Road. Cyclists can use the multi-use trail, and also PTVs or golf carts can use it. And we have a kind of a cluster of them up in this area that are registered. So there's some extra added benefit there. The one thing I wanted to brief Mayor and Council on was a few years ago, actually maybe 18 months ago, I apologize, was when we looked at the sidewalk gap right near Coleman Road, just to the east there. We brought this before Mayor and Council before spending any design funds. We wanted to examine filling a sidewalk gap there, but given the challenges associated with it, we wanted to consult with the Mayor and Council before spending those funds to see if we had the appetite to do it. And if you're familiar with it, here's Coleman Road. You're looking west on Magnolia. This is Pine Grove down here. It changes names at the signal. The idea was to put a multi-use trail on this side of the road, and you can see it's very challenging to do that. I think at the time, the cost to implement it was almost $500,000. I think today it'd probably be closer to $600,000 or $650,000 for design and construction. That's primarily because you'd have to build not only the sidewalk or the multi-use trail, but a retaining wall due to the steep terrain here. And here's the same area looking from the traffic light, looking back towards Canton Street. It's a very challenging terrain, and you have a lot of trees. I can't remember the number of trees it would have involved taking down, but it would have been significant. At the time, the Mayor and Council decided that we would table this, not pursue it, as pedestrians could use the crosswalk and use the existing sidewalk on the south side of Magnolia to walk up the hill towards Canton Street. And there was also some talk of maybe if we built a multi-use trail, maybe we consider putting the multi-use trail on this side going up the hill. So that's just some of the past history on the corridor I just wanted you to be aware of. And then the good news is our new T-SPLOS 2 program. It has identified the corridor here along Pine Grove Road. I believe we have about $14 million allocated for 2 T-SPLOS projects, up from basically Mimosa going out to Cobb County. The final concept and scope is yet to be determined, but it would likely include some type of bicycle or pedestrian improvements. And if there's money left over, we could probably do a few intersection improvements at North Coleman, perhaps at Hightower or at Shallowford. And those improvements may be turn lanes or maybe a traffic light if it's warranted. But the good news is there's money and there will be improvements likely coming. And transportation will be working on that to develop those concepts over the next several months. So there's definitely some good news coming. But with that, that's kind of a high-level recap of the corridor, what's going on out there, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. So, great job giving the background, and the interesting thing is basically that portion that you mentioned long before construction costs went up, it was at $500,000. I had actually forgot the high cost because I felt the biggest attention was the discussion that it would have, due to the terrain that you mentioned. It was a very large number of trees that would all be cut down and a very large retaining wall that would be right at the entrance to the historic district. And as you had so eloquently put, was that council just decided to table it. So basically, this was seen as on the matrix one of the highest priorities, and there was the full funding available for it. But due to all the challenges and the controversy around that, instead just nothing was done. And so basically, what I believe this council should do is really based on something that RDOT already led by example with, originally on hardscrabble, which is with the bike ped master plan, cost, terrain, all those different aspects were not a factor, and therefore which side. And so on hardscrabble, the multi-use trail was supposed to be on one side, towards the target, and RDOT came to mayor and council requesting to move it to the other side because of costs, logistics, all those different reasons, which I think RDOT did a great job of and certainly supported, and making it really more feasible project and saving a lot of money for the taxpayer. And I think there's the same opportunity right here. So basically the previous council, because it it's a difficult decision, and so instead, no decision was made. I think we should make the decision, and obviously, there's no ideal situation or decision, but ultimately, I think, as was discussed at that meeting and with staff a while back on what they had brought up as different possibilities, that the multi-use trail be moved from Coleman Road to wherever it goes towards Canton Street. And the reason being is, one, it reduces the size of a retaining wall needed for a sidewalk there. Number two, saves a lot of trees. And number three, what's certainly been expressed by staff and even from the development community is basically across the street there. There's a lot of there's development interest, and of course there's always more efficiencies when there's a larger development going on. So for a number of different reasons, what I think we should do is move the multi-use trail on that portion of it, and that way having the ability to actually put in the sidewalk gap and fill that in. But that being said, I'm not advocating for filling that in immediately, because when staff came to council with basically the money for it, that was prior to T-Splost. So now that the T-Splost voters have approved T-Splost funding going towards the corridor, that is something where I think for that other side, it should be T-Splost money there. But that's basically what this is. On what every discussion that staff had with me is basically, there's the cost savings, there's the tree savings, there's the impact of a large retaining wall, and then just overall a savings due to just our code with how it works for our sidewalk policies, et cetera.
Councilmember Hall?
Thank you, and thank you, Mike, for bringing this forward. Very, very exciting that we're getting closer to realizing sidewalks. On the western side, from Lake Charles all the way to Cobb County, we've been asking for sidewalks for close to 30 years. And almost as long as Ms. Russell's been asking for sidewalks. I would like to remind folks that there were, on the T-Splost voting, that the section from Lake Charles to Cobb County scored higher than the section from Lake Charles to Canton Street. So I would like to make that point, that we're very interested in that. But I have a question on, is it possible to extend the bike ped master plan west beyond the 1 mile that it is? That's just a very heavily traveled bike route. And by doing that to Shallowford, if you went out to Shallowford, which is about 2 miles total, you connect all the neighborhoods that go up Shallowford. I mean, you just have tremendous connectivity with all those neighborhoods along Pine Grove, and then all the way up to Shallowford to Jones Road, effectively giving them access to be able to get to downtown.
Right. Yeah, the current plan is to do sidewalks all the way to the west. The portion in the bike ped master plan, that's the hub and spoke, that is for the multi-use trail, which is a great asset for that part of the community. Because again, you'd be able to bicycle on it. I mean, you can walk on sidewalks, but you legally can't ride a bike on a narrow sidewalk. So this would be great for both bikes and pedestrians.
Yes.
And also, the traffic calming devices would be great, especially for those of us that live in that section and are reminded by certain people in blue to slow down.
Yes, Councilmember Palermo?
Excellent, thank you. And so on that note, I guess there'll be an additional thing that I'll be suggesting if this council supports, that basically the three things that I'd be looking to move forward from here, and certainly let us know on if that's bringing a vote to council or what that is. But number one is moving the side of the road for the bike ped master plan from Coleman Road to, from Mimosa to Coleman. That'd be number one, and that'd be the actual action item. But then also it'd be for staff looking at two things, which is knowing that there's 14.8 million in anticipated T-Splosh revenue for this corridor, that one, that staff look at the possibility of extending the multi-use trail further down Pine Grove, and number two, for staff to look at the possibility of just in that 14.8 million of just traffic calming measures, because the last thing we want to do is just be accelerating traffic to and from Cobb County.
All right, thank you. Any further comment or question or recommendation to staff? Yes, Mayor Wilson.
I just want a clarification. What's the request on the table?
So the request on the table is for actual action item, is that the bike ped master plan, the multi-use trail, is on the north side currently between Coleman and Mimosa. And and I've already gone through just the costs associated. So to save costs and make the project more, just basically create some cost savings to move that portion to the other side of the.
So you're just basically proposing an addendum to this map, this document that lives in the bike ped plan.
Yes, exactly. So that way, and the reason that's relevant, and the reason why, if council supports, I want to make sure we're moving that forward from this committee, is that it's relevant because if a developer comes in with an application and therefore, of course, having to follow our sidewalk policies, then of course they're required to meet the code that's covered in this. So that's why I think it's important that we're officially updating it, and it's not just guidance, because that's very relevant for any time developers come in for new buildings and developments.
All right, thank you. And this
So
being,
the suggestion is an addendum to the bike and pedestrian master plan?
Does that cover it from a development standpoint?
Yeah, if you make it a change to the hub and spoke map that's in the bike ped plan, yeah, that would cover it.
On
Okay.
this particular location?
If that's the motion, yes, for this location.
And that's based on reasons that you believe it to be less expensive?
Yes, significantly.
And that's based upon just comments made in this committee meeting?
Yes, which is the costs associated and controversies associated with the north side, which is why the council tabled it, and then in addition to that, just development interest on the opposite side.
I guess I'd have to study the matter a great deal more before I could support it. So I would advise my recommendation to be vote against it without a great additional study on the matter.
I think that makes sense, but I will motion to approve, because this will literally be millions of dollars to taxpayers.
I don't know that, Mike. You're just making that up. It sounds like out of thin air. I'd like to see some data on that. This is the first time I've heard of it. So if you got some data, bring it to the table.
Well, I will bring it at council, but again, there is urgency because.
Committee meetings are the reason we do this work. We do this work in committee meetings.
And I think for millions of dollars, it's worth doing
I
some
think
extra.
for $1 million, you should be prepared to bring it to a committee meeting.
let me, if I may interject, this item was originally designated as a discussion item, was it not?
And that was not the discussion that I had with staff. So again, I certainly have I have a motion. What I'd encourage, if it's that important to discuss prior to council, I certainly encourage we have a work session or a special call meeting for it. But ultimately, for the city to build on 600 feet or more, and I think it's actually might even more, versus not doing that, I think there's no question that we got a quote for 300 feet over a year ago that it was over $1 million. It was $500,000. And so knowing that potentially for 600 feet having to build a multi-use trail, that's where I think it's a fair estimate to say it's a 7-figure amount that could be saved.
That sounds great. It'd be nice to hear that, I guess, in terms of the presentation.
If I may add, when we brought this to committee a year and a half ago, the estimate for the construction was $375 and another $50,000 for design.
I thought you said 500 earlier today.
Yes, with inflation. That was
Oh, I thought you said to over
cost.
600,000. Okay,
No,
gotcha.
I'm assuming it's gonna be north of 500, almost 600,000 now, based
Okay.
on today's trends.
Okay. And then is it fair to say that if that's your estimate for 300 linear feet, that when we double the linear feet, is it fair to say it's linear, that you just double the expected cost?
The length of the gap that we're talking about is around 300 feet. It's about a football field long.
Except you're only looking at the 300 feet, but what's really, the distance is, if you want to actually pull up Google Maps. No, actually, if you could pull up Google Maps to see to measure an actual distance.
You want to measure a different area?
Yeah, so basically the area to measure is from Coleman Road to where the old tea house is. So not Crespo's, not Shanghai. What's the next one? Roswell Garden. Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? From Coleman?
So, yeah, from Coleman Road. And down to the Roswell Garden.
To that intersection there?
Yeah, exactly. Up on Magnolia. Yeah.
About 860 feet.
So 860 feet would be so that it would be that amount less the fact that, and then, so that's from the financial standpoint, but then also it's from the retaining wall standpoint, that on the other side, it's not only that we're having to pay for 865 feet, but we're actually having to do retaining wall given the different terrain over there and the trees. So that's where I certainly agree with that. There should be more, prior to an actual council vote, there should be more data. But I do believe that this is something important enough and significant enough, and given the timing aspect, that by waiting, we lose the opportunity, in which case.
That's an interesting argument, Michael. There should be more data brought to a committee meeting. So we can make a reasonable, thoughtful conclusion. And this sounds too speculative to me.
I think that sounds reasonable, and something like, say, the flashing beacon or anything where there's no sense of urgency, then I completely agree. We'll make sure to have the full amount. But for this one, what I certainly.
Sense of urgency is based upon what? The fact that you say there's a sense of urgency? I'm not clear on where the sense of urgency comes from.
That's staff discussions based on development interest.
Absolutely, there's development interest, and absolutely there's staff interest, and absolutely there's council interest. Let's have more information at a committee meeting.
Okay, and with that, so again, so we don't have to go back and forth for the next 20 minutes. Again, what I'm saying is, there absolutely is development interest. It absolutely is happening now, and 865 feet of multi-use trail being built literally will absolutely save over $1 million for the city, and avoid a large retaining wall, and save I think it might have even been hundreds of trees that you had mentioned, but we can go back to that meeting to figure out what the estimate was and how many trees. And I think that should be presented at council, and if this committee decides that that's something they're interested in, so they can make that full decision then. But so that's basically my, well, I'm not gonna make a motion yet, sorry, I see more.
No, I'm sorry, I was going to recognize Councilmember Hall. Okay.
I just wanted to say that this was discussed at great length in prior committees, and there was a fair amount of information. I don't remember it all, but financially, it made sense at the time to move it, but there was not a consensus on
There's a
council.
lot of good discussion.
Yes.
There was no final direction.
There was no final, and it always had been in my mind, going to be moved to the other side, and we've just been busy with elections and.
It was unanimous that it should not be built on the north side, but there wasn't consensus on actually making the real active decision to actually move it to the other side. So instead, nothing happened, which is what I think this mayor and council should not be doing anymore. I think this mayor and council should be having action and should be making the tough decisions.
I couldn't agree with you more. We should be making the tough decisions. And when we make tough decisions and come to agreements, we should stick by them. And when we have conversations, we go through things in thorough detail, we should stick by them and not surprise one another in a public meeting. You're exactly right, Michael.
That's very fair and reasonable. And actually, that's where I bring up too. So again, I'm hoping there's support to bring this to council. If there ends up being new information that, for example, when they show the committee, when it was, all the data that went into it, it turns out no trees were being cut down, that's new information. And I'd certainly encourage, with new information, you potentially change your viewpoint. But with this information given today and what was provided by staff, to end this conversation, to make sure that we move on, I would like to make a motion to move this to the next council meeting to adjust the side of the, for that portion that we've discussed.
We have Councilmember Palermo was making a motion. Is there a second at this time? A further discussion? All right, no second at this time. Further discussion? Or is? Okay, further discussion. Councilmember Vanstrom, I believe I recognized you or saw the question first.
Am I missing something here? We're just talking about saving trees, not having a retaining wall, moving the sidewalk to the other side.
And saving money.
Is there something I'm missing? Okay.
Councilmember Hills.
I'd like to also see, before we move this to council, a work session to discuss this thoroughly. I was not involved in the previous deep discussion that went on, and this is the first I've heard of this. I'd like to know on the other side, the south side, what that topography would bring in cost, because it looks like, and I'm not standing there, that it drops off, so there's gonna have to be an elevation evaluation, maybe a rail. I don't know how much that costs. I don't know what kind of trees are over there. That does cut off on the north side the availability of foot traffic or bikes to get up to where our new boutique hotel will be pretty soon, which would connect to the other part that we're talking about working on. So I don't have enough information, and I'm not anywhere close to moving this to council.
To be clear, though, there'd be no cost on the other side.
No cost at all.
Correct.
Who's paying for that?
Developers are required to pay for it under the code.
Okay, I need to discuss that more then. Are we doing that this evening?
I think we should be,
you guys
because otherwise,
prepared to
it's
discuss
only if
that?
it's in time. Yeah, if,
I move that we table this, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
well, I was already making a motion to approve, which of course you could deny.
Well,
and then
so if there's a motion, I think have a vote on the motion. You're exactly right. There's a motion to approve.
Back. There was a motion by
exactly right.
Councilmember Palermo, and I believe I'd ask for a second. If not, I'll clarify second. All right, clarify second there, and further discussion. Councilmember Hills.
I would entertain further discussion with this council, so I'd like to table this and move this to a work session, if that's the appropriate next move.
We have a motion.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. I'll go ahead and take a vote with that comment. I'll go ahead and take a vote. Motion and a second. All those in favor of moving this item forward? All right. All those opposed? All right. That's 3-3, therefore that is a denial. Is that correct? All right. So we'll, and Councilmember Hills then had a further comment regarding a motion. Yes, Councilmember Hills?
If the next appropriate step would be to discuss in a work session, that's what I would like to do.
Okay, Councilmember Hills would like to discuss in a work session. You put that in form of a motion?
Could we schedule that for next week so that we'd still be able to make it in time for the next council meeting?
What is the crunch here? I don't understand what's going on.
Urgency, yeah, there's urgency on your matter. There doesn't seem to be urgencies on other matters.
Correct.
And this could have been brought to us before, Michael. We could have had this discussion long before
We
this.
did with each of you.
We've not had this discussion.
Yes, we
No,
have.
we have not.
Yes, we have.
We have not talked about
we
this matter, Michael.
I've brought it up to each one of you. I talked to each of you one
No,
on
sir,
one.
you haven't.
Yes, I did.
No, you haven't.
All right, and I'll,
So, you know, that, all right.
Councilmember Hills had made I think a motion, is that correct?
Yes, please.
Okay, she had made a motion to have this item deferred into another committee meeting, is that correct?
She said was it work
I'm sorry.
session or work
You
session?
know, I look for guidance on what would be the
Okay.
appropriate time and place
All
to
right.
do that.
Okay, all right. Then I think you've essentially rescinded your
Sorry.
motion, and we're in a
So
discussion
I'll make a different motion knowing
Okay.
it first failed. Oh, or Mr. Morthland, I'm sorry. I didn't
Let's
see you had your hand up.
acknowledge Councilmember Morthland, please. Yes.
For my benefit and the benefit of the new council and mayor, I would propose that, is it possible for us to get with you guys, transportation, on maybe Friday morning and get a crash course on exactly what we're talking about here, so we can get up to speed as compared to what Councilman Palermo and Councilman Hall are already aware of?
You're out of town. I'll be glad to do it if I need to.
So, I mean, first thing Friday morning, possibly?
I can do that.
All right, is the thought then, from that perspective, then for council members to meet with staff and gain additional knowledge on this particular item? Is that correct?
I'm in New York. I'm not here.
Okay.
Go ahead. Do what you guys want.
I think we certainly, staff, would like to make sure that we understand the direction of the mayor and council as it relates to this item, if it is to bring it forth to another committee meeting or to bring it to a council meeting. I believe that motion was denied to bring it to the next council meeting. And so we want to make sure that we have the proper direction so that we can properly inform you for next steps. And so with that, I'll recognize Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you.
Yes.
So what I encourage and definitely do like the thought process to make sure you're getting just up to speed on the details of what staff had just mentioned. But I guess given the timing and the opportunity here regarding the taxpayer money that can be saved, if it was moved to the 23rd, and as you get the crash course and don't like the sound of it and don't feel that it potentially saves $1 million, then obviously it could just be voted down the 23rd, and I'd gladly motion to vote it down if you felt if the discussion with staff did not save $1 million.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Yeah, I do hope, based upon that comment there, Councilmember Palermo, that you in fact do vote it down, based upon earlier this evening, you denied $700,000 of direct savings to the taxpayers, which was real and concrete as provided by the Director of Finance of the city, and with true value pointed right in this meeting with numerical numbers right in front of you. And yet the urgency of that $772,000 did not seem to be that important to you at that moment in time.
Well, actually,
Forgive me, I've got the floor. And you said, you know what, I don't see urgency there. The person that's thrown the $1 million figure on here has not been staff, it's been you. And so our simple request was, could we please see some very detailed information as to the information you're talking about so it can be corroborated by staff? That's been our request. Staff actually presented a $772,000 savings to our residents and our taxpayers that was going to be effective fairly immediately, and you denied that. So I'm fascinated by this urgency equation all of a sudden of how your perspective is urgent on something that we don't even know the numbers are right or not. Staff brought up the earlier numbers, and yet that wasn't good enough. But when you bring up the numbers, and staff didn't provide those numbers, and all we're asking for is, can we see staff provide those numbers in a decent presentation? So I'm a little confused.
So, and thank you for sharing that. What I'd say is, the difference is two things. One, I didn't deny that budget item. I voted against it while there were enough votes to bring it forward. If it is urgent, it needs to go to council. There needs to be that full discussion. And but I also needed to make it clear I had concern. And with the $700,000, as I made the concern clear, is it's actually with half of it because the new information that didn't exist before or we were not aware of before, which is the prepayment. So that's why I said I'm going to vote against this today and certainly give it a lot of consideration prior to the council meeting, which is all I'm asking of you all.
And I think that's sorry.
Yes,
Sorry,
Mayor
Chairman.
Wilson?
Chairman, my
Yes.
apologies.
Please go forward, Mayor Wilson.
I think that's all we're requesting, is information. And the information was provided earlier. I don't know what the difference semantically is between deny and vote against. To me, they kind of sound the same. If I'm denying or I'm voting against, is there one that's better than the other?
To deny, you have to be in the majority.
And, yeah, but, I mean, Michael, you are a part of this body. You're a big part of this deliberative body. What you say matters. What Peter says matters. We've been over that particular piece of information in public together, and we could have had a longer discussion. You guys voting against that is a big deal. That's a big deal. Personally, I see it as a betrayal because you could have had a longer conversation about the matter. You could have said, I'm opposed to this, Kurt. Can we talk about this? I'm wholly against it. We've been working things out for 6 months. So if you want to know I'm pissed, I'm pissed. Because if we want to go down that road and start playing that game, I'll start doing it. I don't see it in the best interest of the city. You voted against giving the residents back $772,000 because of a piece of information that was new from Ryan, that Ryan presented earlier. I wasn't happy about the information, and Ryan, you should have shared it with me earlier, and you should have shared it with the rest of us. But you know what? It was probably a surprise to Ryan as well. And I bet you Ryan wasn't happy about the $15,000 prepayment penalty. But I'm requesting that when that kind of thing happens, don't allow a vote to go on and say, look, I'm against this. Say it publicly. I can't support this because of the $15,000, and allow us to have a conversation. And so, you know what? We don't get in this BS of being opposed to one another on BS matters. Because that $772,000 mattered to me because we worked hard on that for the residents of the city. It mattered to me. The budget now, we got to go back and rework the budget for $772,000. Well, we voted for it, but I have two council people, two incredibly important council people, who now voted against it. Taking it to council. That's problematic, guys. So, yeah, we can play these games all day long. And I don't think it's in the best interest of the city.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I think what I would like to do is bring it back to this particular item, the discussion of the Pine Grove Road sidewalk gaps, and seek some understanding of where we want to take this matter with respect to direction of staff. There are a couple of options, of course. One would be calling a work session perhaps next week that would provide further guidance or discussion or information. Another one, of course, would be for members of council to meet with staff prior to the next meeting, which is on May 23rd. Obviously, the agenda for that particular meeting would still have to be developed and devised, and would be determined whether or not this item would be on an agenda per those discussions. And so there are a couple of options there. We just want to make sure that that direction is given to staff so that we know how to proceed.
So
Councilmember Palermo, yes.
I'd like to propose we bring this to the next regularly scheduled committee meeting, so the Wednesday, the 25th, and that if this council approves it then of course it goes to the immediate next.
That would be the
Mayor and
24th.
council.
That would be the 24th, Councilmember Palermo.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, 24th.
Tuesday the 24th, and then it goes to the 14th, or the 13th
13th,
council meeting.
yeah.
If that's,
Yeah. Okay, is that a motion, sir?
it is. I'm probably going to want to get with staff, ComDev staff afterwards to see if that's if that ends up being an issue or not. But obviously, the mayor and council would always obviously have the authority to make
Sure.
adjustments in the future.
Right, yes. And so is that a motion, sir? That's a motion
Well, I see Councilmember
bring
Hill
to the
has
next,
comments.
yes.
Can you tell me the urgency that you're,
So the way the code works on the sidewalk policy is if you submit an application, then you're required to meet the sidewalk needs at that moment. And so basically, if a developer submits an application, when we don't have a multi-use trail required being from the plan, then basically they're not required to build that plan, in which case, then ultimately the smart decision would be for us to do it on the other side. And then ultimately doing it on the other side is where we're gonna have to pay for it ourselves, and we're gonna have to build that retaining wall. So basically, it all depends on if anywhere along that line where we're discussing changing, if any development requests come in, that's where the urgency exists.
and that's underway right now then,
There is immediate interest.
which I have zero information on that. So I need more time.
All right. Councilmember Palermo, I believe you did make a motion to bring this to the next committee meeting, which would be on May 24th. And so with that, is there a second to that motion? Second by Councilmember Hall. Any further discussion regarding the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All right, thank you. We'll bring that item to the next committee meeting on May the 24th. Thank you all very much.
And in preparation for that, my request as liaison to the Transportation Department is going to be that ASAP, you provide the cost expectations and all that detail to email the mayor and council so they have it immediately. We can get together afterwards on just what that means, but I just want to set that fair expectation in front of everybody.
All right, thank you. Sorry, you finished? Okay, thank you. All right, with that, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the Administration, Finance, and Recreation and Parks Committee. Motion by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Hills. All those in favor? All right, thank you very much. Just a second, I'll get it to turn. Hold on one second. All right, we're ready to go. All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the Public Safety and Public Works Committee for May 10th, 2022. Elected body present, Mayor Wilson, Councilmember Hall, Councilmember Palermo, Councilmember Vanstrom, Councilmember Hills, and Councilmember Morthland. The purpose of committee meetings are for the city departments to convey information to the mayor and city council, discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda, and by ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, members of city council, and the city administrator. Excuse me. The ordinance does mandate the city administrator's chair of committee meetings, and this is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is certainly open to the public, we do not take public comments or questions during committee meetings unless specifically authorized by mayor and council. And public comments or questions are received at the regular city council meetings held at 7:00 p.m. in council chambers on the second and fourth Monday of each month, and in the fifth Monday of each month in open forum. We do encourage citizens to engage our online platforms. If you have any questions or need information regarding any matter, our staff is available to provide that information to you. We'd certainly encourage everyone to visit the city's website for meetings, events, departmental information, and also the city web service portal to report issues or concerns. In addition, please review the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget on the city website. There you'll find details of the components which comprise the FY 2023 budget. And also, the proposed budget was presented at yesterday evening's regularly scheduled city council meeting. You can also contact our finance staff for questions, clarifications, and a comprehensive understanding of the budget framework. First reading and public hearing for the FY 2023 budget will be held on May 23rd at 7:00 p.m. here at City Hall and City Council chambers. The second reading, public hearing, and expected adoption will take place on June 13th at 7:00 p.m. here at City Council chambers. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting for April 12th, 2022. I will entertain a motion of approval of those minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Hills. We have a second by by Mayor Wilson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. The motion passes. For the record, we do not have any public safety fire items for this evening's committee meeting. Under public safety police, we do have 3 items. The first item, number 2 on the agenda, is consideration to award the police motorcycle fleet purchase contract to Killer Creek Harley-Davidson in the amount of $304,595. Chief Conroy.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Knighton, Mayor, City Council. This first item is consideration to award the purchase of the police motorcycle contract to Killer Creek Harley-Davidson in the amount of $304,595. We put a bid out to purchase 10 Harley-Davidson Electric Glide motorcycles with custom upfitting. This went out to all of our vendors. We had one respondent, which was Killer Creek Harley-Davidson. We were requesting approval for this contract as well as to trade in the current motorcycles either to Killer Creek or to govdeals.com, whichever is the higher price for each motorcycle.
All right, Chief Conroy, thank you. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Chief. So appreciate, just out of curiosity, so through the normal procurement, it goes to 36 industry targeted and 8 potential bidders. We only got 1 respondent. Is that 1 respondent the only one that actually has these motorcycles that you all need, or there are other ones they just didn't submit a bid?
I'm going to let Ryan speak to that.
Yes, before we put the bid out, the staff did some research and looked at some of the other bids that had gone out for motorcycles around the area. And what we had found was there was maybe 2 or 3 total that had responded, some from as far away, I think, as out of state. But in this case, we only were able to get 1 respondent.
Okay, so it's not that they're the only ones that sell electric glide police motorcycles, it's just they're the only ones that responded for whatever reason?
Right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Hall?
Thank you. I just had the question about, so you're going to keep this, how many surplus are you going to keep, or you're going to auction them all off or turn all the others in?
So this one we're trading in 10, correct?
9.
9, I'm sorry, 1 was totaled. So we're trading in 9. We have 2 currently in our fleet that will remain. Those are 2018 models.
Yeah, I'm just asking because it's always good to have spares, you know, so I just didn't know if you were planning on keeping.
Correct. Does this give you any spares?
So we're allotted 12 motorcycles. 1 was totaled and never replaced. So currently we have a fleet of 11, 9 2014s and 2 2018s. But yes, we will keep the 2018s as training motorcycles, or if one of the new ones is in the shop for repair, the author can jump on one of the spares and continue to work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, then we will entertain a motion to move this item forward. Motion by Councilmember Palermo, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item number 3, consideration of a resolution to submit an application for the fiscal year 2022 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant. Chief Conroy.
Okay, thank you. And before I start this item, I will draw your attention, the amounts in here have changed a little bit. This is a fresh grant and a grant that we were under a timeline to get submitted. We used the old cost of the vest, so I will update this with the new cost as I present the item. So this is a resolution to submit the application for the fiscal year 2022 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant. This is through the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance. This is a grant that we do routinely apply for and do routinely receive.
Motion to move forward.
Do you want me to give the updated numbers first?
Yeah, sure, yeah, absolutely, but
Sorry, so the grant would be in the amount of $24,864.75. The vest costs $994.59 each. The match would be $24,864.75 for a total of $49,729.50.
All right, thank you. That motion by Councilmember Palermo, second by Councilmember Vanstrom. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And then the last item, under Public Safety Police, consideration of a resolution to submit a COPS hiring program grant. Chief Conroy?
All right, and so this item is to submit a grant proposal for the COPS hiring program grant. This is a hiring grant that the city, as far as we can recall, has only participated in once, almost 20 years ago. My prior department, we participated in this regularly. This grant is a 4-year grant. The first 3 years, they provide 75% and the city matches 25%. The 4th year, the city provides 100% of the salaries for these officers. The reason I wanted to have a little bit of discussion about this, one, we don't know how many we will receive that we apply for, so we're proposing to apply for 9. This number came from the 9 positions that were defunded several years ago to get a raise for police officers. We don't know that we will receive 9. One of the things that I want people to be aware of with this grant that might be different from my prior department is hopefully when we get these positions, we are going to be full staffed. When you're full staffed, you have to account for the cost of equipment and vehicles for these police officers. We do have those cost proposals. I would like to see what we get and then bring this back to the committee for acceptance when we find out what we do accept, if we do receive acceptance for this grant.
All right. Any questions or comments for Chief Conroy? All right. Yes, Councilmember
No, I just
Bastrop.
want to thank you for that transparency. That was very helpful, thank you.
Thank you. In my prior department, fortunately, we had hundreds of vacancies. We never got full to where that was an issue. As we were applying for this grant, filling out the forms, that became a concern of mine, that we will have to have vehicles, weapons, ballistic vests, tasers, body cameras, computers for each of these officers if that does arise. That would be a good problem to have. So.
All right. Any further questions or comments from Mayor and Council? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to move this. Oh, that was, move this item forward. We'll entertain a motion to move this item forward. Motion by Councilmember Hills,
Motion to move this forward.
second by Mayor Wilson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right. We do not have anything under Public Works for this evening. And yes, Councilmember?
May I say something about Public Works?
Sure.
I went to the water treatment facility this past Saturday, and it was outstanding. I wish somebody was here to hear that. Well, Janet was there, and I think Mr. Knighton, were you there after me?
I saw you as you were, I believe, going to another meeting. Yes.
I
was
won't
there
go
as
on,
well,
but the
yes.
best was the water main repair, the best. And,
Oh,
and
yes.
a shout out, if they are watching, to Josh, Corey, Kyle, Jesse, Andy, and Chris. And then who was sitting at the front? You and
Oh, no, Patty Weatherby.
Patty.
Who was the rock star of the water.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was great. Great educational
Yes.
event. Of course, the Arts Festival, a number of other things happening in
Yep.
the great city of Roswell.
Went there next.
And we certainly encourage our residents to take a look at the website, get that information, and participate in all of the wonderful activities taking place here in the city. Also, before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I certainly want to congratulate the mayor and council for everything you've done over the first 100 days in terms of the 100-day plan and everything that you have were able to accomplish. I've been in local government for 30 years now, and I've not seen a elected body move as quickly and expeditiously as you have, and actually get some tangible things accomplished and lay out a vision for the future for the city of Roswell, and so you should be commended. With that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Motion by Councilmember Bastrop, second by Councilmember Palermo. All those in favor? Thank you very much.